so glad that you're joining us. Today, we're talking about accounting in Israel. We're talking about employment opportunities, how to make the move to Israel in the field of accounting. And we're so pleased to have with us three excellent panelists in their field. And before I go ahead and introduce them, I just want to take a minute to tell you a little bit about what the employment department does at Nefesh B'Nefesh. I want to invite you to send us your resume if you're getting ready to start your job search, if you're within, I'd say, a couple of months of making Aliyah. You can go ahead and send us your resume to resumes@nbn.org.il. That email address you can see down below in the chat. And sometimes we're able to pass along resumes to many companies that we're in touch with. In addition, we have a great job board. The Nefesh B'Nefesh job board is there for you to research what's out there well before you're actually looking for a job. If you need help, if you need guidance, if you want to talk through what your employment options in Israel look like, or if you really need help with your resume, a resume for Israel is formatted differently in Israel than it is in the States, in Canada, in England. So go ahead and send us an email to employment@nbn.org.il, and that email address is also in the chat below. As we go through this workshop together, I invite you to put any questions that you have in the Q&A. You can ignore the raise your hands or the chat box. Let's focus our questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to some of your questions during this workshop. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. I wish you all the best with your Aliyah plans and hope that this gives you a good push in the direction of getting here and making your Aliyah dreams come true. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite our guests to introduce themselves. They'll tell you a little bit about their Aliyah story, how they got here to Israel, how they ended up in the business that they're in, and a little bit about their professional background. So Yosefa, why don't we start with you? Go ahead and introduce yourself to our guests.
Hi, my name is Yosefa Huber. I'm a US CPA specializing in US taxes for individuals living in Israel. I grew up in South Florida. I went to a very intensive art high school, which fed very heavily into the arts, and I put in a year in design school. I started at Carnegie Mellon University, which brought me to Pittsburgh. Eventually decided that's not where I wanted my life to lead, but I love Pittsburgh. I stuck around there a while. Got to try lots of different things. And when there weren't opportunities for my husband and I in Pittsburgh, we looked at making Aliyah. We put it off for a little while. We moved back to Florida with our daughter. I got married in Pittsburgh, had my first kid there. And then we moved back to Florida, spent some time there, and eventually decided to go on and make Aliyah. In that time, I got a degree in accounting. And while I was getting my degree, I did a pilot trip about a year and a half before we made Aliyah, and interviewed at 3 of the big 4 accounting firms. And that was able not just to get me a potential job, but to give me a lot of information about what opportunities were like in Israel. And so I was able to tailor my education a little bit to that. I actually was offered a job pending making Aliyah and finishing Ulpan. And then I finished my CPA exams. I took my last exam just a couple weeks before we made Aliyah, not even knowing.
Wow, that's great timing.
Yeah. If I failed, I'd have to move back, go back, but thank God I passed. And one of the other things I did was that, knowing that I wasn't planning to work in Florida, I was able to do a little CPA shopping, and I picked the state that worked out best for my needs. And at the time, I wasn't planning. I was pregnant with my 3rd daughter, who was born 2 weeks before we made Aliyah. And so I wasn't really planning to work right away. So I chose Alabama because they have what's called a 2-tier system. And that gave me a more sort of shelf stable CPA certificate, because I didn't intend to do the work part, the experience part of my CPA right away. So I was able to just keep that CPA on the shelf until I was ready to work.
Wow, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks.
Ido Pollock, let's go to you. Tell us a little bit about your Aliyah story and how you ended up in accounting, what sort of work that you've been doing recently.
Sure. So I had that in common with Yosef. I actually grew up in Pittsburgh since the age of 3. Grew up in Pittsburgh, which is definitely a nice, foundation to come from out of town, so to speak. Did make my way back to New York. I went to Cy Sims, Yeshiva University, for university. Came out, started at Ernst and Young in New York. Was not for me. Did not fit that mold. Quickly followed a client to Eisner Amper in 2005, and been there ever since. I did 10 years in New York with the firm, while my wife Rena was going through medical school at Einstein Medical School, and then the fellowships and the residencies and this and that. But we eventually decided, we got to get out of New. We were in Riverdale, and we were looking at making Aliyah to the West Bank of Teaneck, New Jersey, or the West Bank of Efrat. So I'm glad to say that we chose on the right one. And I gave notice. I gave a year's notice. Went into my boss,
Wow.
Chris, and I said, Chris, got some news. He just laughed, smiled, laughed, said, you're an idiot. But okay, let's figure this out. And again, my approach was really just, I want to go there. This is something I've always wanted to do, not just to try. I wanted to do it all in. That was definitely something which I think is important. Not to waver. Not I'm thinking about it. It's got to be an all in type of a thing.
It's a great attitude.
Yeah. I guess Chris is a really smart guy, and he would see through. If it wasn't truly something I wanted to do, and he called me back the next week and said, "We're doing this obviously, but I'd like to make a condition that you do a proper office." And I was just past my 30th birthday or 31st birthday, and I was thinking, "Holy cow,
Wow.
this is incredible opportunity." And I said, "Yes, yes, let's do this." And it took a lot of the common kol hatchalot kashod, all beginnings are difficult, is an understatement when you're trying to start not only with the aliyah process but also opening an office. It
Sure.
took I would say a good year of setting up the company. I mean, we were doing this from afar, from the
Sure.
Manhattan Israeli consulate, so that was an experience every time you walk in there. But then even to open a bank account, right, it was a 6-month process.
So
But I'm happy
you
to
really
say
jumped into everything, not just trying to transfer your work,
full
but
in,
it's
full
basically starting a
in.
whole business here.
Yeah, we definitely relied on some of the Nefesh B'Nefesh network of trying to talk to this person, talk to that person, see what would work. We didn't actually fit any specific mold in terms of, because again, I was coming, one of the things I mean, thank God we get a lot of phone calls these days, not just myself and my team, about Aliyah. And one of the things that we always like to talk about is portability, right? In terms of being able to take your job with you in one capacity or another, right? But 2016, we launched the Israeli subsidiary of the U.S. Parent company, and we're now 5 years on, and we have just about 20 people on board here in Israel, with offices in Tel Aviv and in Yerushalayim. The team is breaking my arm to do a Beit Shemesh office just for
Sure.
convenience sake. That's always a nice
That's great.
midway point. And we're doing taxes for the
Mhm.
past 5 years, mostly U.S. expats. We're doing a lot of investment funds, so we're doing venture capital. We're doing private equity, hedge funds, a lot of real estate now, as well as startup companies. We started.
Wow.
We brought on some corporate people to do the startups, And
Ido, I'm
then,
going to pause you there because I want to make sure we get to some questions, but that's a
sure.
great intro and an amazing, and I think a little bit of a unique story in terms of getting your branch set up here. But thank you so much for being with us. Daphna Pearl, we'd love to have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about how you got here to Israel and what you've been doing professionally.
Okay, so when I was 15 years old and I was in Israel on a summer program, someone asked me, why don't move to Israel? I said, of course I'm moving to Israel. And every Israeli looks at you like, yeah, yeah, yeah. In 1992, I made Aliyah by myself. But before that, I always knew I wanted to live in Israel. And I decided not to wait around in Montreal. And that's where I'm from, if you can't hear the Canadian accent anyway. And I studied at McGill, and I did a Bachelor of Commerce, or Minhal Hasakim is the degree in Israel. And I actually had absolutely no interest in doing accounting. I was going to do marketing. I was going to do all sorts of other things. And everyone said, no, just do an accounting concentration because it's more practical. And the next thing I knew, I was working as a summer student in a large regional firm in Montreal. That was in 1989, and I set myself a plan that the second that I pass the exams in Canada, or the UFI exams, and finish my stage, I'm making Aliyah. And that was exactly what I did. Ido, a little similar to you. They all knew, I talked about it along the way, but when I went in to say I'm making Aliyah, they're like, no, you're not really going to Israel. People talk about it, they
People
don't
just
really
talk
go.
about it. They don't actually go.
Exactly. And
Wow.
It was actually a huge compliment, because what they do have a goodbye party and a goodbye lunch, and everybody goes to the lunch and everyone pays their own way. And the partner actually paid for everybody. He was just it was such a via tick to say, wow, kol hakavod, right? You're going to Israel, do us proud. And I came on Aliyah straight. Thank God I had a sister living here. I went straight to her house and figured it would take me a while to find a job, but everybody was correct. Accounting is a great thing to bring to Israel. And I had connections. I'd also done not so much pilot trips, but I would come every year before then anyway, and already had meetings set up with various different accounting firms. And I actually ended up getting a job within 2 weeks of making Aliyah.
Wow.
With one of the two largest firms in Israel, which is today KPMG, because the firm that I worked at in Montreal had a joint audit with them. And I went right in, and I came with English, and I actually had a pretty fluent Hebrew as well. So the combination tends to be something very good. So anyone out there listening, I strongly recommend start working on your Hebrew already now. Your English will be an asset for sure. But if you can work up the Hebrew a little bit, it only helps. Of course, you can do that here as well. But I think Nefesh has online opens and things like that. It's a good thing to do. So I came on Aliyah, as I said, within two weeks. I was working at KPMG. It wasn't KPMG then; it was Somachaiket. And I worked there for 6 years before joining one of our clients, a venture capital fund, as their CFO. And I worked as a CFO in the venture capital fund for another 6.5 years. And basically, since then, I have provided basically CFO type services to various high-tech companies. And ultimately, now I've segged into two nonprofit organizations that I work with, as well as a third gig on the side in my spare time.
Copious spare time, yeah.
And just to say as well that I married here a year after I got here and have 5 kids, and somehow have managed to mother them despite working in these very it also allowed for flexibility to the extent that that was also very helpful.
So that's Daphna, thank you. That's great. I actually want to continue your last thought there, because you're talking about raising a family and juggling your work. There's actually a question in the Q&A about working part-time. Yosefa, Ido, can you talk to us a little bit about not full-time options, or how does the work week compare to the mythical 70-hour work weeks at the Big Four in the States?
I can speak to that a little
Yeah.
bit. I think there's a wide range of opportunities. I think I would assume Ido is working more than 40 hours a week. but I do too. There is a range, and I think a lot of that depends on what you're doing and what you come with. I think one thing that I've loved about Israel is that I also have 5 children, and I love that I can have 5 children and also be respected as a professional. I don't think I would get that respect in the States. I think people would think it was a little, that I must be a little bit mashugana if I have 5 kids. And, and I don't think that I would have gotten the same respect in meetings and things like that. Um, I sort of had accidentally, within my first week at my first job, accidentally made some comment about nursing and was like so embarrassed. And it turned out that the boss was like super, super supportive. And like he was really good friends with my nursing consultant. And it was just like
Small world.
really super supportive. I didn't even start working till my youngest at the time was about almost 2. But I find it to be a very supportive and respectful atmosphere. But when it comes to part-time, you have to keep in mind that a lot of the jobs you might be getting, you're going to have to be trained for. And I can tell you as an employer, I don't really want to train somebody and buy them a computer and put them on payroll and take the risk that you take on having an employee in Israel if I'm not going to get a certain number of hours. So it is a challenge. When I was looking for my first job, I ended up not taking the job with one of the big 4 that I had been offered a year and a half before Aliyah. Things came up in my life and I didn't quite make it through upon the first time. I did manage to get a job within a couple weeks of when I started looking very quickly. I found a job actually through networking. Someone who I had networked with pointed something out on Facebook to me, and it was a really nice fit. But I was only offered things that were full time, and I just had to do it. I mean, that's why I just didn't start working until I was ready to do it, and it's tough. And I wish I could say that that wasn't the case, and you might get lucky. And if if you have a job you can do remotely and bring here, that's great.
Yep.
But I don't want people to think there's tons of part-time opportunities. It is a challenge.
No, I think it's really important to come with the right expectations and the right understanding of what's available. Ido, do you want to add to that at all in terms of part-time work?
Sure. The trend in the US as well as Israel, I would say, is towards flexibility. It's a huge topic, and Corona just amplified that to the nth degree. I'm interviewing people up in Carmiel, down in Beersheba. I hire people basically sight unseen in certain scenarios. We've had phone conversations, but I think over this past year, we've onboarded 10 people.
Wow.
And again, there's been some interesting challenges and whatnot. Every employee is able to set their schedule. I mean, that's the goal. Does it always work perfectly? No, obviously, this is not a perfect world. Israel's not a perfect place in that, to find someone with the exact skill set that we're looking for is very, very difficult. We actually just started this past summer, one of our senior manager from our audit department in New York made Aliyah, Ellie Bloom. So we officially are now offering audit services here in the country. Again, it's a global service, but it's being done from here as well. And he was looking for a very specific skill set and came up empty-handed. And he came to me and I laughed and I said, no, you need to repurpose someone who has within the ballpark of what you're looking for. We can actually, retool them and make it work. You have to be flexible in the other direction, right? That the employee has to understand that we might take you and train you for something else. But that said, I think almost half of our staff is flex time, meaning a 3-day, 4-day work week. They have the option to spread that over 4 days, 5 days, whatever they want. And we've also essentially flipped it where our day may not start till 11 a.m. and then we'll be online
I'll just
at
keep going.
9, 10 o'clock, right, to overlap with our New York office or our San Francisco office. So there's definitely some challenges, but hourly seasonal is definitely something which you can find here. And even the big 4, we've seen them move towards that as well because of Corona.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions in the Q&A have asked about non-CPA accountants, people who've majored in accounting, or maybe a master's in accounting, corporate accounting, but not a CPA. What sort of work is out there for somebody who doesn't have a CPA but has a decent amount of experience in the accounting world? Daphna, do you want to start with this?
Sure. So I have worked in various different places. Many of the people want to see a CPA, it's true, but there are definitely plenty of people who are also looking for either an MBA or some sort of general, accounting background, and especially if you might have a little bit more knowledge in another area per se, and then say, well, we're going to work with auditors anyway, and they'll, provide that expertise. But I offer, I know I have an expertise in cost accounting, or I bring with myself experience from this field. I worked in the media field, I worked in the whatever field that you can find that would be in-house jobs, obviously. Even the accounting firms, some of them, they'll have various different departments, and some of them don't necessarily hire CPAs. They'll also hire people with a broader background depending on the area in which they're focusing on. So it's definitely a possibility as well. And again, it depends. Market yourself in the right direction with the skill set that you have.
I'd like to add to that.
Great.
I think it in some ways could be a plus. The salaries in Israel tend to be lower. And if I was hiring somebody, I would most likely have to be training them, because there's not a lot of people who specialize in international taxation, and especially working with people in Israel. There's just so many things that you need to learn when you're working with Israelis. So I would have to be training them. I don't necessarily want to be have to offer them a salary for somebody who is a CPA with years of experience in a field that isn't going to help me very much. So I think, there's lots of opportunities. I think that employers are looking for people who have enough background where they know that your brain is working in the areas that they're going to need to train you in, and that they can see that you're trainable and hardworking. I think getting people who are committed to staying in Israel, committed to working hard and working seriously, I think people are looking for that. The CPA is great, but a lot of the jobs you're going to take here, you're going to have to be trained. So to have a CPA and a lot of experience in something that I don't need to hire for, it's not necessarily a plus.
Steph, I just want to add one thing to that. I'm actually a Canadian CA, and when I made Aliyah while I was working at KPM at whatever Solomon Chaikin, I transferred over the degree, because that's what you have to do if you bring a CPA from Israel. You transfer over the degree. In my day, it was a labor law exam, a company law exam, and a tax law exam. And I did that while I was working. So that, again, it doesn't answer the non-CPA, just to know that generally if you come with your CPA, it's an advantageous thing to do if you can. By the way, at least 2 of the exams were in English, and even the third one, I think today, can also be somewhat in English, in terms, if that question would come up. That's just transferring it if you are a CPA.
I can tell you, my Hebrew is not great. It's enough to read all the statements and not enough to take exams in Hebrew. I had a friend who took the exams, the Israeli exams, with the translation. She said the translation was so bad, she wished she had taken in Hebrew. It's a common question. I'm just assuming probably somewhere in the Q&A, people are asking about getting the Israeli CPA. And it's not required. I think it's great. It's great on your resume. It's great, for your experience, but I haven't done it, and I have more than enough work. It's not on my to-do list. If I was going to get another degree or certification, Israeli CPA is not in my top 3. There's other things I'd rather learn. I figure I learn enough through experience. I'm not planning to do Israeli taxes. I just hired an Israeli CPA who's not a US CPA. She has the background and the skill set I need, and I can train her in you know, the other things that I
Yeah,
need.
it's definitely a question that comes up a lot with people who are accountants looking to make the move to Israel. Should I become an Israeli accountant? Not. There's definitely
Yeah.
what to be said, as we can see, going both ways. I
If
did want to.
people,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
people should also consider the EA certification, enrolled agent. That's very popular because a lot of the work in Israel is in taxes, is in individual taxation, and the EA is a perfectly good certification if you're going to be doing taxes, and you can get that more places, and I don't think you need to have specific classes. Like with the CPA, you have to, your college, you have to have
You have a
taken
set
very specific
curriculum, yeah.
classes. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Ido, I want to go to you with the next question. We've touched on it a little bit in terms of how much Hebrew do you really need. I'd love to hear from you in terms of how much Hebrew do you use on a daily basis, and what do you see in terms of your colleagues in accounting? How much is there a need to be fluent or very solid with Hebrew?
So for better or for worse, you don't need a lot of Hebrew. I mean, I would say when I was going out to conferences and or even just, you know, prospects, clients and whatnot, there was more Hebrew in my life, right? Because we would joke, I would talk in Hebrew, they would talk to me in English, and we would just not understand each other. But with Corona, there's, you know, a marked, you know, decrease in terms of just human interaction, and you fall back onto, you know, your survival skills to get through it, and that's definitely going to be in English. My wife, again, who's a doctor working daily with patients in the hospital, her Hebrew is constantly getting better, and mine is constantly getting, I would say, somewhat worse, unfortunately. Yeah. But again, you know, in the beginning, there was more Hebrew, ironically. And then as I continue, I'm in a bubble with other, you know, there is a mix of you know, Americans and Israelis on our team, but it's definitely English is the preferred business language. So that's, you know, hands down, you know, where that falls. But I would like to get back to it, right? There's always that dream that we will go back. I've lectured, I have presented in Hebrew, you know, to other companies and whatnot. So there is the ability to do that.
There's some need for Hebrew, but it sounds like you can get away.
I want to qualify that, because both, if I'm not mistaken, Yosef and Ido work in the international world, in the U.S. taxes and the international accounting firm world. If someone is interested, for example, the non-CPAs who want to get a job here, it'll be in an international firm. But if you're going to be working in more local, you know, firms here, it's a broad range. I will say that for sure I use my Hebrew in a lot of what I did. Not all of what I did. The venture capital fund had, of course, tons of English, but I work in one nonprofit organization where when there was Israelis. So, and also a lot of the things that I have to do is reach out to this office or that, you know, any of the local authorities that you have to deal with. Try dealing with Mas Akhnasa, I mean, the local tax authorities,
Bureaucracy
or the VAT or any of those
English.
things. And what?
Bureaucracy doesn't work in English.
Not only doesn't it work in English, Hebrew is an asset. Although, again, if you don't have it, you can always use your accountants to help you reach out to those entities. I'm just saying, I have found it to be an advantage, although obviously in the international world, it's not a necessity.
Right.
I agree with that as well.
I think you need enough Hebrew to also be friendly in a corporate environment. That was my biggest challenge in my first workplace is, you know, just your water cooler talk was very stressful for me. And I like meeting people, but that was hard. Thank God I had an incredibly understanding boss who, you know, really wouldn't put up with people making fun of me or, you know, and my lack of Hebrew. But I have to read all the statements. I have to read the bank statements and things like that. So those are things I learn. A lot of them are in, you know, I get used to the format and I learn when I need to learn. But since I hired in January a native English speaker, a Hebrew speaker, I don't break my teeth on quite as much as I used to. I just hand it over to her.
Right. Yeah, I hear that. Yosefa, you mentioned earlier about onboarding new trainees, new team members, and the need to train them. I hear a lot of concerns from Olim, and I'm seeing a little bit in the Q&As about concerns about being too qualified, overqualified, too much experience, or past 60 and looking for a job. Now, ageism is definitely something that unfortunately exists around the world, certainly in Israel, certainly in the States, certainly in Canada. Can you speak to it a little bit in the accounting field, or does anybody else want to jump in terms of
I think maybe Ido would be
overqualified?
better
Yeah.
if
Ido,
Ido
go
wants to
ahead.
answer this. He's
Yeah.
definitely hired a lot more than I
Okay.
have.
Great. And it doesn't need to be
So
from your personal, professional story. It could be something that you're just aware of in the accounting world.
right. So it's definitely a challenge. I'm happy to say that we hire from, we actually started taking interns. We have 2 interns now from IDC who are fantastic. Happens to be they're both from Teaneck, New Jersey. That's what those are the resumes they sent us, and we brought them on board and training them literally. Neither of them actually are accountants. One is in finance and the other is in economic major. Again, if you're good with numbers, so to speak, right, and you can see systems and whatnot, if you're telling me veterinary school, and this is probably not the field for you. But again, we do not focus strictly on accounting, right? A course in accounting, I would say, is helpful. Debits and credits, which by the way in Israel are flipped. Debits and credits are flipped. That's always a big challenge. But we also we hired a retired partner. He joined us. He was, over 65, and just said, he wants to keep, whatever he can, almost like if there's spillover, we should, use him on basically a seasonal approach. And we have, and it's been fantastic. So I'm really excited that we were able to do that. And we do look to do that in the future. Overqualified, again, I think when you're making Aliyah, you're going to have to, it's like a double-edged sword. You have the chance to reset and kind of like, okay, what did I not like about my life, my work, my job, right? And what did I like? And then kind of focus on what you like. But on the flip side of that, understand that what you love and like may not be exactly there. It may not be what your next employer is
Right.
looking for. So be open-minded to slide a little bit within your comfort zone. Don't oversell. Don't say that you're overqualified. Just be yourself, right? Say, look, I'm looking for this job, and then let the interviewer or your possible future employer say, I think we can work with your skill set, or I just don't think this is a good match. Don't take it personally. I think it's definitely a tricky area. But again, I know that we are currently for our summer season are looking for part-time. We are looking for experienced, as well as bringing on 2 more interns.
Right.
So there's a gamut, and there's hope, so to speak.
And I really like what you said about being open-minded. That's part of the advice that I always give out. Be very open-minded and proactive. Don't lock yourself into this is exactly, what I need to be doing. And Ido, you also talked about trying to figure out what it is that you like about what you're doing. So I'll actually throw that question back to you. What do you like the best about what you're doing right now? It sounds like you've worked in different parts of accounting, different fields within accounting. What is it that you like the most about what you're doing now?
The most has got to be the people, the team. I mean, I feel almost like motherly, right? Where we've grown this, one at a time, one after another, building, and we function as a team, which is fairly unique within the accounting field, right? Even our firm in New York, you find that people kind of segregate into little bubbles or teams and whatnot. We have weekly calls sometimes separate, but a lot of times together. But then when work comes in, we function as a team. If someone's overloaded, we shift. And just because you're doing individual taxes doesn't mean you can't help out on the corporate side or vice versa. that team effort, which I think we've brought to a fantastic spotlight, and we've shared it with the rest of the firm, right? So we have 2,000 professionals globally, from San Francisco to New York, Miami, wherever we are, all the way out to Singapore and India. But any office that's having a bottleneck knows at this point that they can reach out to Ido in the Israel office and say, hey, we have these 3 tax returns that need, can you help us, right? And we just say 9 out of 10 times, we say, yes, of course. Who you're going to staff on it, it doesn't make a difference. Be like, give it to me. We'll figure this out as a team. And it's a nice thing, which it's no longer just about compliance or taxation or numbers, right? We're helping people, not only our clients, but we're helping out colleagues, right? And we're helping, get things done in a better, more efficient way. So I think that is something we can truly be proud of. And it's special, and it's nice that it's being done here in Israel.
It sounds great. It sounds great. And it sounds like Corona's only expanded your opportunities with the team being located, all over.
Last March, when the firm announced everyone go home, we work from home, they sent everyone home with a laptop, right? I sent everyone home. We didn't sign our new lease. I had a lease on my desk to expand. I never signed it. I mean, it's becoming a problem now because we're going back to the office and now we have no room. But basically, we just gave everyone 2 monitors, keyboard, chairs, table, whatever it is, put them in a taxi, send them home, and that's it. And then instead of taking our budget of building out the next the sublet that we were going to do, we just took that budget and invested into the people. You got got these little earbuds, or a nice headset, Bluetooth, whatever it is. We've invested in the people, which in a way is so much nicer and empowering, to make your team understand that we care about them.
It's a good strategy. It's making the best of the situation, for sure. Daphne, I'd love to hear what you enjoy the most about what you're doing now, about working in accounting in Israel.
I will second exactly what Ido said, the people. I've, as I said, worked in a range of places. Some of them I like the people a lot, some I like a less lot, but learned from every one of them, and very, very much so the people. Although also the challenge, and as I said, I've gone to various different places, and each place learning that aspect or that, and also as everyone said here, coming with an open mind. Each change that I made required, shifting from an accounting firm to a venture capital fund, going from a venture capital fund, which was the center of, everything, going to work in a small high-tech company, and then in a like just each place, just going, learning in Israel, lizrom, to go with the flow. And most importantly, as I said, also, I completely agree with you, is the people side of each team you work with, and each what you learn, and the people that you meet in each place is worth everything. All the less savory moments.
For sure. There's a question in the Q&A, and we're going to start winding down soon. So I invite anybody who did not get their question answered during the session to please reach out to us at employment@nbn.org.il. But Yosef, I wanted to throw you a question. Somebody was asking about starting their own business here in Israel, but continuing to serve their clients in the States rather than serving expats in Israel who need to deal with
I would love
US.
to answer that.
Yes, great.
Before I do want to say on what Ido was saying, I know a few employees on that team, and he's not exaggerating. They seem very happy. And Eisenramper has also been a really great thing for our local accounting community. They've hosted and done some various educational opportunities, and we're just really happy to have them in Israel. So it's been great. And I think we do have a pretty nice accounting community here. I started a Facebook group. There's a WhatsApp group. There's opportunities for Israel-specific education. And that feeds into the questions. So on one hand, it's great to bring a job and bring your clients, because you can usually charge more than people make here. On the other hand, you need to be ready if, let's just say you're doing individual taxation, not something that's totally like, actually, if you are in the business of doing individual taxation, your neighbors are likely going to ask you to do their taxes. And you're going, not you specifically, but I do see this a lot. You start to think, well, I can do a 1040, I can do a tax return. Why can't I do my neighbor's tax returns?
Right.
But you've never really had the experience in international taxation, and it's hard to get. It is hard to get that experience without working in a company, without working for somebody who has a lot of experience. The webinars and regular CP you can get online, it's very hard to get the in-depth experience that you need to do international taxation. And it's very hard without really having on-the-job experience to know and get used to what you need to be asking from clients. You're just not going to know to, let's say, for example, look at someone's wage statement and someone tells you, oh, I only have this one pension. I know how to look at the wage statement and say, wait, it looks like you also have an education fund. And the client sometimes has no clue. So
right. What does that even mean? Yeah.
That's just the kind of thing that I mean, if you want to be offering that level of service where you're very thorough and you're asking people about everything and you're there for people and being able to explain and answer their questions, it's very hard to do that without the experience. So I would say that's fine. If you have clients, great, but be really, really careful before you think that you can just start taking on slowly local clients. And I also want to say one of my biggest pieces of advice to people, accountants specifically moving to Israel, don't try to do your own taxes, please. I don't care if you've been doing your own taxes for the past 50 years. Don't do it. Just hire somebody.
I don't do mine.
I'm actually the
up.
accountant for one of Ido's employees, who you would think is perfectly qualified,
Sure.
but she's also brilliant and knows individual taxes are not her area of expertise. Corporate is, and she hires me. So just think, if she knows and she works in the business, please just
I love it.
bite the bullet and hire a professional.
That's great advice. I love it. And I actually want to continue with that line of thought for our last question. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. Advice that you would give either to your past self, 10, 20, whatever years ago, just starting out, or also we speak to a lot of people who are entry level or in college even, still thinking about their career path. What advice would you give to somebody who is yet to make Aliyah and just starting off in accounting in terms of experiences they should try to check off, or a path, some things that have been very good for your professional development, things that you feel like was a mistake along the way, or a gap? Daphna, why don't we start with you? What sort of advice would you give somebody just starting out but trying to make Aliyah?
Okay, so I will tell you that it's 51% luck, which means a majority of luck, that everything works out like it should. But I will say that in my case, it was 49% planning. And it meant that I knew that I went into accounting because I was told it was a really good thing to bring to Israel, and they were right. And I went and I worked in a large regional firm, which was actually a large Jewish accounting firm, knowing that they had some clients in Israel. It worked. It doesn't always work, but it was just, it ended up being my segue into my first job here, which was amazing, and the best Merkaz Klita or absorption center that you could find. But aside from that, I had 2 other interviews set up in advance that I had set up on pilot trips. It really, and again, Israel is the land of unknowns. Everything comes at you from every direction. If you can, as much as you can plan in advance and try to set things up, and things will come from all direction, but to try to plan as much as you can, and then roll with the, go with the flow, as I said before, once you get here, and see what direction it takes you.
Great. Ido?
I would agree. Planning is great, if just for your own peace of mind, to kind of to know that you did your best, all right, to make sure that it should be a success.
You did
there
your
were things
homework.
that right. I definitely have friends who it does happen. They come and they go back, right? It does happen. I think we have to acknowledge that. And not to say that they didn't plan, but to if that should happen, to just say that, I dove in head first without any planning, right? Then you start wondering regrets and what would have been. I always wonder what would have happened if my boss, Chris, would have said,
No.
sorry, we're not really interested at the time. And I can tell you right now, 6 months before I went in to talk to Chris, we acquired our San Francisco office that had the India office. And if not for that, I mean, that was really one of the signs I took, was like, oh, here we are. We're an international office.
Yeah.
It's a country that starts with I. This is good. But again, dumb luck, right, is part of it. But definitely do your homework. Your accountants, right, or finance, run your budgets. Try to get whatever numbers you can. You can find stuff sometimes online, or talk from different people. Come to these events. Nefesh for Nefesh is definitely a wealth of knowledge, and can connect you to the right to the right people, even if it's the wrong people. Sometimes you'll just get a nice piece of information that you didn't know before. It's definitely do as much as you can to make yourself feel. We're conservative as accountants in general. Run your budgets and stuff, right?
Also planning. Yeah.
Right. And definitely come for a visit. You meet a few people on the ground. Most people will tell you we can't make you an offer until you're actually here. That does happen. I can tell you I've missed out on a few really talented people because I said that. And I try never to say that again, because they came, they found jobs, they got comfortable, and they don't want to, they don't want to make a move after they're comfortable.
Right.
So, I think, the world is open, and Corona has definitely kind of made the employers rethink the way we do things. And I think now is better than ever to make a move.
Yeah, I'm definitely hearing a lot of those stories, more flexible, more open-minded from the side of the employer, which only makes it easier for people trying to make Aliyah or thinking about where in Israel they're going to end up. And Yosefa, let's end with you. Advice
I'll
that
try
you
to
would
be
give
quick.
your past
Yeah.
self or a student, somebody
There's
entry
two
level?
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's two things I would say. One is networking, and two is manage expectations. So really, really work on just talk to people, be friendly, call me, WhatsApp me, say, my number's all over the internet. Just look me up, WhatsApp me, say, hey, I'm thinking of making Aliyah in a year. This is what I'm studying. What do you think of this? Like, I'm always happy to chat with people. It takes me about 18 minutes to walk home. So pretty much any night, I'm happy to have someone walk me home. If you want to talk about taxes or, whatever you're thinking of doing, I'm happy to give you my 2 cents. And I have networks that help me. I have tax questions and other people ask me questions. I pay it forward. People help me get a job. People answer my questions and I help where I can. The second thing is managing expectations. I had somebody not too long ago was looking for a job. He was in, I think, like corporate taxes at one of the big four in Tel Aviv, and he wanted something that was like a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more, laid back, less pressure, and more money. I was like, okay, like you can't really have it all. You're not going. Maybe he'll get lucky. God willing, he will. He'll find just what he wants, but somewhat unlikely that he's going to find a job where he's working less than 40 hours a week and really, relaxed atmosphere, making more money than in corporate taxes. Right. So, it's the same. I love my job. I love that I get to know my clients. I love that I work for myself. I don't have to be responsible to a boss if I say something that's a little too personal, or, really get to know my clients. And so I really like that, but it also means I'm taking a limited number of clients because I do like to get to know my clients. So I'm not making, corporate whatever. So you have to think about what you want in your life. And you might not have it all. And also Israel isn't going to fix your problems unless your problems are like healthcare and day school tuition. Israel might fix those problems, but I think a lot of the people that move back, it's because they think that Israel's going to fix things that it isn't going to fix.
No, I think, and that's a great point to close on, to manage your expectations, to be open-minded and proactive, but also to have realistic expectations of what's here. and what the field looks like and what your options look like. And I want to thank everybody for joining us on this workshop. I especially want to thank our panelists, Yosefa, Ido, and Daphna. Thank you. It was great advice, great insight, and a good understanding of what working in accounting in Israel looks like, especially today. I do want to invite anybody who is actively looking for a job. They're either in Israel already or they're just a few months before they make Aliyah. Send your resume to resumes@nbn.org.il. And if you're looking for guidance, you're looking for resume help, you're looking for networking, you're looking for ideas in terms of what you can do for work in Israel, or if your question was not answered during this workshop, please write to us at employment@nbn.org.il. And thank you so much for joining us.